Hi everyone, my name is Matt. Welcome to my shop. Today is April 28th and this is my weekly shop update. So this past Saturday I went out and did a little logging with my friend Jim. We went out in the woods and we got a few more logs hauled back up to be milled up. So when I tell people I go out logging, I frequently get asked, well, how do you determine which trees to take out? Well, that's pretty simple. We pretty much just take out anything that's dead, dying, or down. 3 Ds. Dead, dying, or down. So the first thing is if it's dead. If it's already dead, we're not going to do any harm by taking it out of the woods. It could be standing dead or it could be down already. In that case, it would fall into the down category. But if it's standing dead, we'll go ahead and take that out. A good example of this, I took some pictures from this past Saturday of a dead tree that we took out. It was a white oak. It was about maybe 24 inches in diameter at the base. It was already standing dead. The bark was starting to come off a little bit, so we cut it down and it was still very solid in the center, so that tree will still make a lot of great lumber. So the next D is dying. If the tree is still standing but has extensive dieback, maybe a lot of wind damage, and it just doesn't seem like it's going to do very well in the environment, we'll remove that tree. And the last one is down. If the tree's already down, well, a lot of the work's already done for us. It's already on the ground. All we have to do is cut it to length and pull it out. So this Saturday, one of the trees we came across was an uprooted ash tree. It was a lot bigger than it looked when we first took a look at it. It ended up being about a little over 28 inches in diameter at the base. Basically, my chainsaw, which has a 28-inch bar on it, couldn't cut all the way through it from one side, so we had to come from both sides. So that's how I know it was at least 28 inches. So we pulled the logs out to the clearing, and from that point, we skid the logs back up towards the house and the barns, and that's when the problem started. It always seems like you go out and there's always something that happens, and this was no exception. So the first problem was that the Bobcat actually got a flat tire, so that kind of ended the day for us as far as being out in the woods and moving things. We were planning on using the Bobcat to skid the logs up to the house. The backup plan was to use the log arch to pull the logs back up to the house with the truck. That presented a challenge because we didn't have the remote for the winch, so we couldn't pick the logs up off the ground and attach them to the arch. So what we ended up doing was just chaining the logs directly to the arch and just pulling them back with the pickup truck, and that actually worked surprisingly well. I did take some video. You can kind of see in the video that this really works. Also in the video you can kind of see how big those log sections were. Those pieces of ash, again, are about 28 inches in diameter and about a little over 8 feet long, so they're pretty sizable logs, and yeah, no problem pulling those back up. Alright, so back to the actual shop updates. This week I made good progress on my shed doors. You can see one behind me here. I have one of them assembled and I'm applying the finish to it. The finish I'm using on the doors is, again, I'm using this again, the General Finishes Outdoor Oil. I like the way it comes out. This door has got one coat on it. It's very smooth, it's just perfect, and it just feels so nice. So this week I started off by removing the panels from the door and pre-finishing those. They both have 2 coats of finish on them before I assembled the whole thing. I assembled the doors using a drawboard mortise and tenon. If you don't know, or if you're not familiar with the dry boring technique, there's a video from Worth the Effort which goes into great detail regarding this topic. I'll put a link to that in the description so you can take a look at that if you're really want to know way more than you ever wanted to know about draw boring. But the concept is very simple. It's simply drilling 2 offset holes in your mortise and tenon, so when you drive a peg through the joint, it pulls the whole thing together. On an assembly this large, it's a lot easier to do that than to try and clamp it all up and get it all perfect, because the amazing thing is during your dry fit, before you drill your holes, if you get your door set up perfectly so it's square and all the joints are aligned perfectly, once you mark your holes and then you take it apart and you put it back together with the pegs pull that door exactly into the same alignment that it was when you were doing your dry assembly. So that is an incredible help. Oh, and a quick note, the pegs that I used for the door were elm. Just some elm I had left over from some bowl blanks. Now up at the top you can kind of see my window arrangement. Now I was talking about that last week, and this is what I decided to go with again, with the square opening in the top. And I assembled that with my domino. I use these little 4x20 millimeter dominoes. They're really small. And a side note regarding these little domino containers, they're great because you can take them right to your workbench and use them as you need them, put them back in the case. But the thing that really is not fun about these is you can spill this. Which I did, so I spent a while picking up dominoes off the floor, so that was a fun experience. The other thing I worked on for the doors this week was I started working on the hardware for the rails. So this is what I came up with. It's just a simple sliding barn door hardware. It's made out of just some bar stock. This is stainless steel, but you could use regular bar stock if you're doing something indoors. I still have to polish this up and drill the rest of the holes, but this kind of gives you an idea of what I'm going for here. I did take a pretty good amount of video about this whole process with bending this, and I'll probably do a separate video illustrating how to make this hardware. It's actually really simple. This is the first time I've ever done any kind of metalworking, although this isn't really fancy metalworking. I did have to bend this. That's really all the metalworking there is here, drilling holes and bending flat bar. But this will mount to the door, and I'll have a track, which is just going to be another piece of flat bar, mounted on the wall of the shed, and then this will just hang on there and roll back and forth, so you can roll the door open and closed. Now the only problem I encountered making these was that the radius that I was trying to go for my curve was a little too tight for the thickness of the flat bar, and the fact that it didn't really have any really effective way of heating this to get it more pliable. So what ended up happening is I was shooting for 1.25 inches inside here, but the flat bar bent to about 1.75 inches to 2 inches, somewhere in there, and then I ended up having to hand hammer it down so it was a little tighter, because the pins that I bought for it were only 2 inches long. Compared to buying these, it's a lot cheaper, and it's a lot more fun to say you made these as well, so, you know, why not? Alright, so the last thing I'll touch on this week is the secretary desk. I'm going to swing the camera around so you guys can take a look at that. So the biggest thing on the desk this week is I got the top installed and finalized. I even got the lock set in here, so now it's actually locks. So if I go ahead and unlock this, you can open up the lid here and you can kind of see some more progress I've made. You'll see this week I added the vertical dividers here, and I cut the profile. On this side, I just cut the two of them over there and actually ran out of stock. The piece I had to make the dividers wasn't quite big enough to make all three. So like I said, the top installation was kind of the biggest thing that I did on the desk this week. I got the front edge here all flushed up with the sides. I got the mortise and the strike plate for the lock installed in the top, and I had to make a modification to the strike plate to make it fit because it was too wide for this front lip here. So I filed that down, and actually it filed down quite nicely, and now it matches that angle. So an interesting part about the installation of the top is I noticed that my top piece had actually bowed this way. So when I went to install the top, I noticed that there was a gap on the top and bottom here of my vertical dividers. So that's kind of exactly the reason why I wanted to wait till the top was finally installed before I cut my cubby hole dividers. I wanted to make sure that the top was exactly where it was going to be and wasn't going to move anymore, so that when I installed these pieces I knew that they were going to be exactly in that position, and I didn't end up with any gaps on the top or bottom if the top decides to move, which is what happened here. So yeah, this week I'll probably end up cutting the other side, the other cubby hole dividers, getting those all finished up, and then I'll go ahead and cut the valences that go on top of the cubby holes. And I have that stock here all ready to go. So that's all for today. Thanks for watching, as always. If you have any questions or comments about anything I talked about today or anything here in my shop, please leave me a comment. I always appreciate those. And until next week, happy woodworking.